In my opinion, outer space is fake. It is a big deception. It's the price you need to pay in order to have a say on the world stage. You need to buy into the paradigm of the outer space thing. Otherwise, you can't be a science teacher at a university and be like, no, I don't believe in outer space. That's a bunch of BS.
Here's a quick thought. Maybe people aren't sacrificing their non-belief of space and actually believe that space exists. I mean, you can only go up so far before you realize that you're no longer on Earth, right? So this is a case where someone's trying to deny space, but he's not trying to present a reason why or prove it in any way. So I'd like to see maybe what his reason is. Maybe we'll find out in this video. And just a quick random question. How on Earth, or out of this Earth, can space be gay? I don't even think gay is a property that space can have.
In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the eclipse coming up. I have two articles actually to look at. This first one is about the eclipse. 7 years ago, I was able to see the total eclipse, and the coolest part, in my opinion, was seeing the shadows. You know how the leaves on trees act as pinhole cameras, and they actually project images of the sun on the ground? That's why you see circles all over the place on the ground when sun is shining through trees just right. And so watching those shadows change and become the crescent moons, that was really cool. That is one of the cooler parts of being able to witness a total solar eclipse. Of course, you can see that too if it doesn't go all the way to totality. And then the second cool part was the way that it got dark. It doesn't get black. And that's because there's a difference between sunlight and daylight. It doesn't go completely black, but it does turn into a really strange twilight kind of light, and it is an odd feeling. It's a very mysterious feeling to be in the presence of totality, for sure.
Okay, so at least there's that. We do agree that eclipses happen, and I'm looking forward to the one coming up, but unfortunately I won't be able to see it myself because I'm in the UK and it doesn't really appear here, which is unfortunate, but I do hope you enjoy it. So how does this relate to space being gay or even fake?
In my opinion, outer space is fake. It is a big deception. It's the price you need to pay in order to have a say on the world stage. You need to buy into the paradigm of the outer space thing. Otherwise, you're not even allowed to play the game. You can't be a science teacher at a university and be like, no, I don't believe in outer space. That's a bunch of BS. You must submit to that thought process in order to proceed in their little game. And that's how they work. It's the same thing with evolution. You're not allowed to be a biologist and say that you don't believe in evolution and say that you believe in adaptation and that talking about 1,000,000 years is a bunch of BS.
Okay, so this has now jumped to 2 different claims and potentially even 3 claims. So we have space is fake, evolution is fake, and potentially the age of the Earth is fake. Just as a little guess, I'm assuming that last one, based on what he just said.
Talking about 1,000,000 years is a bunch of BS.
However, he could simply just be talking about evolution here. But there is the other assumption that this person is making, in which you have to believe in these things, which you don't. You absolutely don't have to believe in these things. But you certainly have to learn about them, as everyone else around you, if you get this sort of job role, is going to be aware of these things and going to have good knowledge on it. And if you want to refute these things, you will also have to have good knowledge on these subjects. You are allowed to have a different belief, you are allowed to present your own hypothesis, then you can start working on creating it into a theory. But it has to be a working theory, or something that solves a problem in its current field of study. For example, the theory of gravity is something I use quite a lot because everyone knows gravity exists, but for a long time we didn't really understand how, and quite frankly, we still don't. So you are more than welcome to try and create your own theories, just like with gravity. We do currently have multiple theories of gravity, only one really stands out on top, which is like Einstein's theory of general relativity. The previous theory was Newton's theory, which accounted for almost everything we can tell, from small things on Earth to large things in space. But the one thing it couldn't really predict that well was Mercury. So we still knew that it wasn't really complete, that maybe it needed something else. So Einstein came along with a theory of general relativity, and now we've noticed something else, like the spin from galaxies. We know that the spin of galaxies should be spinning faster at the center rather than the outside, but yet that isn't the case. In reality, we see something else, so there are new theories coming about, and dark matter, being one of the easier explanations that you can fit into relativity, is currently kind of the placeholder for that. And MOND is a new theory of gravity, which goes back to Newton's and expands on it, to create a better theory for gravity to explain those galaxies. It's not perfect, and it certainly isn't going to take over yet. Now, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but my point still stands. You can challenge current ideas in science, and people do on a regular basis.
It's not science. It doesn't come down to the scientific method.
Yes, it does, but the scientific method changes depending on the field of study. For example, if you have astronomy and you've got to study the stars and the planets, you'll probably have a different way of trying to prove things and make sure that your science is credible than you would if you're trying to look at history or the past or evolution. Both of these things have things in which you cannot observe for the same sort of reason, time frame. When you look at evolution, you have to look at the past over millions of years. You can't watch millions of years because you're not millions of years old. And same with the cosmos. As you look into the night sky and you have the biggest telescopes in the world, then you're going to see pretty much just a picture of what's going on there. But you're going to have to watch it over millions of years to figure out exactly what's going on, to observe. But we don't need to actually watch things or visit these places to prove that they exist. We can see the evidence of things existing, like stars, planets, and things in space. And we can see the evidence of remains of creatures and how they adapted throughout time, throughout the course of Earth's history. So what is your evidence, if you have any?
Who can travel to a distant star and confirm that all of these fantasies are reality? Or we just have to take their word for it that by looking at light in the sky that they can tell me exactly what's happening. And it all falls apart once you realize that most people, they don't want to be thought of as stupid, and that's why they submit to just accepting whatever the world throws at them.
No, most people don't want to look stupid, so when they look at evidence, they actually realise, oh yeah, this is evidence. If they had any different views, they changed them to match what the evidence suggested. With you stating, have we ever gone to a star, or could we ever go to these stars? No, we can't. Does it matter? You deny space and we've gone to the moon. You're going to deny it no matter what we say or show you. At that point, you're just denying evidence, the reality around you.
Or, because I'm just saying this because I know a lot of Christian people, I feel like they know that it's totally incompatible. I've seen them, at least in my, armchair psychological way, I see them either just show no interest. They'll just be like, oh, I'm just not interested in that outer spacey stuff.
Yeah, and that's fine. Some people aren't interested in space, and that's fine. Everyone has different interests. It doesn't mean that they don't believe it's real. I don't have any interest in football, and I'd probably react in the same way. If it comes up in conversation, I usually just smile and wave and hope for the best. It doesn't mean I don't think football's real.
And I think that that's part their cognitive dissonance, that they realize that stuff it's not compatible with Christianity.
So, cognitive dissonance is the discomfort a person feels when their behaviour does not align with their values or beliefs. An example is, you want to be healthy, but you don't exercise regularly, or eat nutritious diets. Now, that example can apply here, I guess, but I don't understand how being a Christian means you have to deny space. I have read the Bible once and never again, but I don't see why it means you can't believe in space. And no matter what religion you are a part of, if you believe God created the universe around you, admittedly, I'm an atheist, but if you believe God created the universe, then we look at the universe to see what he created. Denying it's denying his creation.
Now, Jesus is enough. Jesus is sufficient. There will be some people that are saved and are duped by that stuff, but I think that it's obvious that all of those lies are to try to cast doubt on God and on what the Bible says is reality. And I think that it's very clear, but you need to reject the world, but the Bible tells us to reject the world.
I'd like to bring up that this is probably more the other way around. Think of Galileo Galilei. He built a telescope and realised that moons orbited Jupiter, which means that not everything orbited the Earth. It put him under house arrest for a very long time, to say the least, and Christianity was pretty much against his discovery at that point, because it challenged their view. But he wasn't out there set against the view, he believed in it at first. Now the point I'm trying to make isn't against Christianity. The challenge he made was against the geocentric model, as in Earth being the centre of the universe. However, that meant that Christianity was already aware of space and was already studying the planets, which means that even Christianity, the top officials, believe space exists. So why don't you, if you're basing it off of Christianity?
I mean, it's easy for me because that's how I came to Christianity, through all of this stuff, learning about flat Earth, learning about all the Satanists in control of course, God is in full control, but here on Earth, who has power here on Earth? The prince of the power of the air is Satan, and his little minions are running around on Earth, scrambling and trying to grab earthly power. That's their riches. Whatever their earthly power, you know how evil people live cushy lives and don't necessarily suffer for it here? Well, God is just, and judgment will come on all, and that's why those people get away with that stuff. Because they're not really getting away with it. They will be punished.
Now, based on what you're saying about space and all the evidence put in front of you, I'd say that you must have a high criteria of evidence, right? Because if you don't believe in all the evidence that has been presented, and it's not sufficient enough for you, then I do wonder what is sufficient enough for you to know that what you just said was certain, that people, when they pass away, will be punished by God. I mean, there must be some really compelling evidence for you to believe that and not space, right? Please enlighten us of this evidence.
If you're in the path of totality for April 8th, total solar eclipse, this is coming up really soon.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot we were talking about the eclipse.
I don't really know how much I want to say about this other than the outer space deception. They don't have proof for any of this stuff.
But weren't you talking about at the beginning of this video how much you're enjoying the eclipse and how much you liked seeing the crescent moon through the light of the trees? Now you're saying it's all a lie? Are you saying you hallucinated it? I'm not sure what's going on here, but we've flipped now. He's enjoying it. But now is he saying the eclipse is a lie?
You would have to believe their stories. All they got are stories, and it's not science. Science, the scientific method, are things that we can test and verify. Who's going to be able to verify about something that happened a million years ago? I could make all sorts of random claims about things that happened a million years ago, but who's going to verify that?
This isn't a million years ago. This is April 8th. You said that yourself. April 8th. That's like 2 weeks away. From when I'm recording this, at least, anyway. And we will verify it. Well, I probably won't because I'm in the UK, but I'll probably see that the moon's close to the sun, at least. But I'm sure if I get any viewers from America, you can tell me if the eclipse happened.
And yet, these people will tell you that it's like fact. These things that happened a million years ago are fact to them. Or distances that are a bajillion miles.
That's because we have more than one way to judge how old stuff is. For example, carbon dating is the most common one known, but there are others. The most accurate is uranium, thorium, and lead dating is the most useful method, apparently. We use it to date the Earth. And radiocarbon dating is useful for materials that were once alive, but uranium, thorium, lead dating is used to measure objects like rocks. So, for example, with the Permian extinction that happened about 252 million years ago, we can see a mass extinction event happen. We can use radiocarbon dating to check the extinction of the living creatures at the time, and with the new rocks that formed in Siberia, the uranium, thorium, lead dating to confirm the rocks, and we can see the events happened at the same time. Both different methods confirm the timeline in which these events happened, and when things line up like that, we call that evidence.
Who got out the tape measure to confirm that the math isn't just shooting out random numbers? And most of their math anyways is all reverse engineered. They start with the answer that they want, and then they fudge the numbers backwards to make it, prove. Who in school did measurements that proved that the sun is a cajillion miles away, or the moon is so far away, but then they're the exact same size? What?
Are you telling me you haven't even looked this up yourself before making this video, whilst also expecting us to have a tape measure that's a bajillion miles long? Well, the first person to figure out the distance, or at least attempt to measure the distance between the sun and the Earth, was Greek astronomer Aristarchus of Samos, and he lived about 2,200 years ago, 310 BC to 230 BC.
And it's crisp. The image of the moon is crisp. When you move objects farther and farther and farther away, it gets fuzzier and fuzzier. But the image of the moon is so crisp.
With your naked eye, it's not really. I mean, if you've seen it in a telescope, then it's crisp. It's really beautiful to look at in a telescope. But with the naked eye, it's kind of just a glowy rock. Or maybe with time I'm just slowly losing my eyesight, I don't know.
So apparently, I'm just saying whatever I want to in this video, and...
Really? What a surprise. I couldn't tell.
I mean, this is an article about there might be explosions on the sun. The sun is not what they say it is.
Well, that depends. Most people say it's fire, and even I've called it that from time to time, but it is actually plasma. And I assume those explosions you're talking about are coronal mass ejections, solar flares, if you like.
I had a friend back in the day who had a P900 camera, and he bought the solar lens, the filters for looking at the sun. It's really interesting. The sun does cartwheels. It spins like a wheel. Like the moon and the sun are both disks, and they both rotate like a wheel through the sky. It's interesting. You know the song about the wheel in the sky keep on turning?
Do you mean they're like spheres that spin, like the Earth does? Or are you actually not being metaphorical here? Do you actually think they're just a disk, like the Earth being flat, so therefore the moon's flat, and so is the sun? How does this all work? I'd love to see your what, I don't know, space model.
See, this CGI thing is not what the sun looks like at all in reality. There's people that their entire livelihood is to sit there at a computer and make these fake ball Earth images.
This isn't the ball Earth image, this is the sun, remember? So as far as I could tell, this flare was captured by NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory. And again, you're welcome to deny, but how is your theory any better of disks flinging through the sky rather than a spherical Earth with a spherical sun with a spherical moon orbiting each other because of gravity? I'm still waiting for some answers on your side of this.
Over and over and over to make people think that they live in this ball Earth reality. How many fake images are we shoved in our face, whether we want to see it or not? How many obvious fake CGI ball spinny images or images like this? How many get shoved in our face every single day?
Well, if you're interested in the subject, like I am, then loads probably. However, if you're not interested in the subject, like most of my family, they just don't really care too much about space in that regard, then never, pretty much. It's never really shoved in anyone's face. It's people who look it up because they're interested in it.
And then how often do people actually get an optical telescope and look at the things in the heaven? It's a very, very, very common occurrence. When people first look through a telescope at the heavens, they get underwhelmed. They go, wait, what? That's Mars? That fuzzy thing is Mars?
I don't own a telescope myself. However, I have looked through many people's telescopes, and I've never really been underwhelmed, but again, because I'm interested in the topic, I think it's brilliant. I looked at the moon and was pretty much amazed by it. I really enjoyed just looking at the planets or the moon in our solar system, just the celestial objects that are nearby. However, most of the people that I was with at the time really, really enjoyed looking at nebulas. They recommended that you should get a Dobsonian telescope for that. So, if it does interest you, feel free to look at that.
Because they're expecting the CGI bullshit. And when people are faced with reality, they're often underwhelmed because they've been programmed to think that it's CGI.
Not really, it's just that people really enjoy NASA because they have these giant telescopes and telescopes in orbit. Even if we don't consider the ones in orbit, even the ones on the ground, they're bloody huge. Now, compare that to the one people have in their back garden. So there is going to be a quality difference, but you most certainly can still enjoy it with a standard telescope. You just need to know what you're doing and research what you're going to be interested in and get the right telescope for you.
So this article goes on and on and on. I don't know that there's anything in particular I want to talk about. This next article is actually more interesting. Move over solar eclipse. Scientists predict a once-in-a-lifetime nova explosion in the coming months. And I think that it's stuff like this that makes it really obvious that the deception is the sandbox itself that the people play in. That scientists out there, they really can study things and observe things and all that and collect data. They can do that. But they're only allowed to draw conclusions in the incorrect deception. If they're allowed to take data on light in the sky, but their conclusions must conform to Spaceballs stuff. It has to. Otherwise, you're not allowed to publish. Who would allow that to be published? And that's not science. Anybody should be able to have any sort of theory about anything. But notice that the system is constructed in such a way that you're not allowed to have outside thought. Once they have decided on a paradigm, that's it. You're not allowed to have any opinion outside of that.
I keep saying this, but you are. You are allowed to have theories outside of what you're calling the paradigm. I get the feeling that you think that all scientists just sit in a room and nodding in agreement with each other, but that's just simply not the case. For example, I like my examples, we have like the cosmic microwave background radiation, which at first was just a theory, and it was a theory to explain the idea of inflation or the Big Bang. And it went against what most people believed at the time, which was a static state universe. As in, the universe always existed as we currently see it today and had never changed. Infinitely in the past and will do infinitely in the future. And that was actually even Albert Einstein's belief. But the theory of inflation did come about, and the cosmic microwave background was just a theory, and we had no way of testing it when it was a theory. Or when it was hypothesized, should I say. So there was no way to confirm it at the time. However, at one point there was a... Now, I can't remember the exact details of the story, but there was an extremely advanced microwave detector that was built for a different purpose, and it kept on getting this feedback signal. A signal that it technically shouldn't be receiving, especially for its intended purpose. They tried to troubleshoot anything and everything they could think of. They even checked inside of it all, and they found that there was pigeon poo on it, and they had to go and clean all of that off, and they still got this feedback. And it took them a while, and they decided to contact an actual physicist who, him and his intern, slowly started to realize what it actually was. And it was confirmation of the cosmic microwave background radiation. It wasn't just confirmation, it was it. They had found proof of their theory, and therefore that now became the scientific consensus. Scientists change their mind. It happens quite often, especially if you look far enough throughout history. You have currently presented a few ideas like the disk sun and a disk moon on a disk earth, but yet, you're going to need to back these claims up with some evidence. Try and predict things with it and see if they come true. And show your workings out. How did you come to those conclusions? And then maybe people might take your theory seriously. Or people will criticize it, and then you can see where it went wrong, and then you can improve upon it. That's how science works. We've done the whole scientists nodding their heads in agreement with each other conspiracy, and we're going to move on. I'm going to cut those bits out from now on, and we're going to see if there's anything else in this video.
And see, this kind of stuff, it doesn't make any sense to me in terms of NASA, spaceball land. But under biblical cosmology, a lot of this stuff makes sense.
Oh no, biblical cosmology. Unfortunately, this might actually be where he has kind of a point. If you consider that point a singularity, as in like it's really small and extremely dense. But when the idea of the cosmic background radiation came into play and the Big Bang Theory became the scientific consensus, the Catholic Church actually agreed with it. And that was because it sounds like the Genesis creation story. Or at least that's what they claimed. But as far as I know, the only thing in the Bible it says is that God spoke the universe into existence. And stuff like, he said, let there be light. We don't have any evidence of, him speaking at those points, but we know that the universe expanded faster than the speed of sound. He probably didn't speak the universe into existence, so therefore, based on that simple logic, feel free to educate me on biblical cosmology, but based on that logic, I would say that it doesn't really have the same effect. They are very, very different. But it's not uncommon knowledge on my channel that I don't really like the Bible. But I don't really like it when people take the Bible literally. The Bible can have some beautiful aspects to it, and certainly some horrific ones. But if you don't take the Bible literally, then I can completely understand. But when you take it literally and start trying to say it's science, then you're going to have to back up those claims with something other than a dusty old book. But hey, feel free to respond and make your claim.
So this almost reminds me of how when Jesus was born, a really bright star came out when Jesus was born. So this, I'll just try a binary star system. Who knows? Who knows what's really going on in this stuff? But there's water up there. That I'm certain of. And God did make the star, the luminaries. Interesting word. Luminaries, the Illuminati, the illuminated individuals probably knew the truth about the luminaries, and they bullshit everybody else. But it's mysterious. A lot of this stuff is mysterious. I think a lot of times the answer is we still don't know. Scientists still don't understand sleep. So it's just a bold-faced lie when they tell you that they can tell you exactly what's going on, allegedly a cajillion miles away and 500 bajillion years in the past. But we still don't know what sleep is.
To be fair, there is still a lot we don't know about sleep. However, scientists are actually learning a lot about sleep. There are still a lot of processes about sleep that we don't fully understand, and that's perfectly fine. At least scientists aren't coming up with a random answer that doesn't make sense. We have to create a hypothesis, create some theories beyond that, and then try to make sure that they're as factually correct as we possibly can. Even if we do have a completely full understanding of sleep, then why would it matter to you? You already told us you don't trust scientists.
And I think that the reality of the heavens is that they understand that they follow cycles, that they have the formula somewhere. I mean, didn't the ancient Mayans and stuff, they had cultures in times past that they'll tell us are wretched and had no technology. They had this stuff figured out, and they follow cycles. It has nothing to do with orbital mechanics. The three-body problem is a problem. It's actually basically impossible to be able to compute complicated systems of, if what they told us was true about spaceballs and
Get your goddamn hands off my mother junk!
it all being due to gravity bending space-time, and this stuff has computational complexities that are just way beyond even what we do today, supercomputers and stuff. But they'll tell you that NASA in the 60s was slingshotting things here and there and around this. It is just bold-faced lies. I mean, insert the Jim Carrey clip of how it's just fishtails, and I can't believe the people bought it.
No thanks, I'll stick to the poor references, thank you.
It's a miracle! The Lord has delivered his healing hand!
Can't win with these people.
The free body problem is still a problem in mathematics or physics. However, there are many problems in mathematics and physics still. For example, gravity still doesn't link with quantum physics. But that means we just have more areas to explore. Science is so much more exciting when you realise stuff doesn't actually work. We have frameworks for many things, but not everything. And that's okay. If we had figured out absolutely everything, we wouldn't need scientists anymore. Or certainly not the researching ones anyway. That's what makes science so amazing. There's still a lot of thought to be had with it. But that's the point, isn't it? Science never claims to have all of the answers. Scientists, every time I see it, get excited when there's still stuff to discover. But people who take the Bible literally always demand that they have all of the answers. Except for one. Anything about their God, because he exists out of our time and space.
3,000 light years from Earth. Prove it! Prove it! How do you prove it? This is where they just start making all this nonsense up about red shifting and blah, blah, blah. Can you really look at a light in the sky and tell people exactly what's happening there because you've looked at that light? I'm very skeptical.
We know that you're skeptical, and that's fine. So look it up and figure out how. You can think about it as wavelengths. So the best way I could easily try to explain wavelengths is that obviously when you hear sounds, I mean, sound and light aren't the same, but you can have a sound wave and a light wave. So when you hear sound, let's say a car's driving towards you, you can hear it sort of gradually intensify in wavelength, which is like it gets higher pitched. But then as it passes you and moves away from you, it's gradually not just getting quieter, but also reducing in pitch as well. That's the wavelength of the sound changing. So the Doppler effect happens with sound as well, but it's also happening with light. So when we see a star wobbling, we can tell that it's wobbling because of the Doppler effect. And as our equipment to detect the Doppler effect improves, we can then start to detect things like a planet orbiting a star. But the Doppler effect doesn't really judge the distance to an object, it's just telling you its current velocity and motion in relation to you, the observer. But combining that with a standard candle, objects that have a known constant brightness, we can use both of those together to create a fairly accurate estimation on distance.
Take us there, and not just with CGI. But then it's so obvious. When you really, really look, they don't hide this stuff. NASA is about as campy as James Bond stuff. And the CGI is so ridiculously over the top, they literally put Pluto on Pluto. And that's where their mocking and their obviousness with the hoax, if you can stand up against the world, and they're so obvious with it. It's campy. And that's why I don't need to get in a spaceship and go to Pluto to know that they're lying about it. Because of course people will come out with the most ridiculous goalposts. Well, you're not NASA, like, so you can't say anything about it. Well, you haven't been on the ISS, so you can't talk about outer space. They'll always have these impossible goalposts. Nobody is going past the firmament.
And therein lies the problem. No matter how much you think NASA are campy, they aren't lying to you. It would be like the most expensive lie ever and the most hardest to contain. The problem is that you have the presupposition that the firmament exists and that NASA can't get past it, which means that they can show you they have done it. They can give you all the evidence you want, and you can ask for all the evidence and they can give it you, except when you ask for Star Trek level evidence, that you just simply won't believe it, no matter what, because your book says there's a firmament, which I'm assuming you get from the Bible. Right, so I've got a few of the Bible quotes here in front of me right now, and it says that God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." You have referenced waters, so I'm assuming this is what you're on about, where the firmament above us protects us from the water in space. The water beyond the firmament that you believe in, I'm assuming. We call it space, you call it water, you believe it's actual water. And here's where it comes in. So you've got also in Genesis, in the 600th year of Noah's life, and the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. The firmament separates the earth from the waters of heaven. And God called the firmament heaven in Genesis, and the evening and the morning were the 2nd day. So the firmament separates heaven, water, from the earth. But yet here it says the windows of heavens were opened. So even according to your Bible, we have windows on the firmament. If we were to take your Bible literally as you've been saying, then we can open those windows. And like the firmament is transparent because the lights were put on the outside of the firmament so we can then have night and day. In Genesis it says, "And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night." So we have the rockets. And you say we can't go through the firmament, but we can definitely reach it. So maybe we're just opening those windows. There's nothing in the Bible that says we can't open the firmament windows and go through it. And if that helps you understand what we're doing, then that's fine. Okay, but I've tried to explain it the way I would explain it to another person. Now I've tried to explain it the way I would for you. Unless you can find a quote in the Bible that says space isn't real, then even your own point doesn't make sense. You talked about biblical cosmology and then say space isn't real. How can you defend biblical cosmology and then say that space isn't real? Because those two don't even align with each other.
I actually had a really cool comment in my other video. Of course, I can't corroborate if this person is real or not, but they were saying that they worked with satellites and it was kind of a hush-hush but understood thing of the field that satellites... And this is where I totally, it sounds believable that they would say this. Well, satellites aren't really in space. It's like at the edge of, and that's where they'll try to pretend like it's a sciencey thing. Well, our atmosphere actually extends out farther than you would, which how does that make sense? It doesn't make sense that you can have really thin, weakly held on thing adjacent to a vacuum. And then things are also supposed to be spinning and flying at incredible speeds.
Honestly, that makes sense. So just because we call it the vacuum of space doesn't mean it's a vacuum going like that all the time. It's just empty space. And then what you said was something weakly holding on to it, which is because there's not a lot there, is just slightly less emptier space because it's got some gravitational pull to it, very slightly holding it to the Earth. And then it becomes a little less of empty space and it becomes a bit more filled space, and then slightly more filled as you go deeper and deeper down onto the Earth's surface. I mean, if you want to argue about pressures and stuff like that, then we could easily just ask it on a more down-to-earth level. So we've got the Earth where we have a constant pressure, relatively speaking. And then as you sort of climb Mount Everest, it gets a bit harder and harder, and breathing becomes slightly more difficult because there's not as much pressure there. And oxygen levels are decreasing. So there has to be a time period where people wait to adjust for that pressure difference.
I believed the comment. It made sense that if you did work with satellites, it might be a kind of unspoken truth that everybody kind of knows and is kind of told about, that hey, it's not really in space, it's like at the edge of our atmosphere. And that sounds very true to me, that they would go ahead and let people in on that little secret.
Yeah, but it's not a secret. You can look it up and find out. That's not that's not how secrets work. So in this case, it was something that you didn't really know beforehand, and then you've just sort of came across. That doesn't mean it was hidden from you. That just means you didn't know about it, and then you learnt about it.
That, and I also think they're all balloons too.
You know what? Maybe he's right. I mean, the ISS is filled with air.
Okay, so this article, I really am like not even talking about the articles, but that's okay. I just want to talk about how outer space is fake. Stars that will get very bright all of a sudden and then dim back down. And it's like, what? Is that supposed to be a supernova explosion? And this is where the sandbox comes into play. Any wacky, crazy thing happens in the sky, they get to come up with some nonsense spaceball answer for why it happens.
Alright, okay, that's the last one, I promise.
Nonsense spaceball answer for why it happens. And that's the game for them. So really cool stuff does happen in the sky. They really do take some data on what that's happening, but then it's the whole story that they tell you about it that's the BS.
The story isn't really a story, it's an explanation. That's why we gather the data in the first place. The stars in the night sky are not like light bulbs where you just turn them on and off. They are real objects, and they increase and decrease in luminosity depending on their activity.
And so this is interesting that there's a star out there that has a very cyclical, it gets bright all of a sudden, and then it goes not bright. Gas gets sucked off of a giant into the dwarf, and then eventually that's like, it hits a critical mass and then it explodes, but it's not an explosion, it's that it gets brighter for a while and then goes dim. It's clearly not like a boom, explosion, shockwave.
Right, so here we have a fire. It's clearly not a shockwave or explosion or anything like that. No, it's simply just getting brighter. As you can see, the flame got brighter and now it's set the tree on fire because of it getting insanely brighter very quickly. And here's a slow motion version of it. But it's clearly not an explosion, you see. It's just getting slightly brighter.
If we're supposed to be in a place where things happen on millions and millions and millions of years, like, shouldn't this process have been going on for millions and millions of years? Like, why is it so cyclical? Shouldn't it be running out of material at a certain point? Or
it sounds like you're so close. Yes, it's been going on for millions and millions of years. And yes, some stars are running out of fuel. Like our own is about halfway through its life. It started about 5 billion years ago, and our star will run out of fuel in about 5 billion years. That's how we work it out. So when a star usually forms, it starts off burning through its hydrogen. And the byproduct of doing that is helium. Helium requires it to be hotter for it to burn through, so when it runs out of its hydrogen, it will start burning through helium, getting hotter. It will run out of fuels to do that with, and that's when it goes supernova. So yeah, that's one method people like to use, but one of my favourite methods, and it's guaranteed to know whether a supernova is about to happen or not, is through gravitational lensing. Because of the fact that it takes time for the light to reach us, everything we look at in space is actually in the past. I'm going to probably make your belief on this worse, probably, by saying this, but we saw a supernova happen 4 times in a row. The first time kind of surprised us. We knew it was going to happen at some point, but we didn't know exactly when. Not to the minute, but we knew it was coming up. When it happened on the first one, we could then see it through a gravitational lensing effect caused by a galaxy. We could see that location at least 4 times in total. So when the first supernova happened, we could then predict how long it would take to appear on the next one. So we could then predict with 100% accuracy when we would see the supernova actually happen again. And again.
And of course, the deception is obvious with trying to tell people that stars are all suns very far away. That's an obvious deception.
I'm being picky now, but not all stars are suns. The sun is the name we give to our star. It's kind of like the idea that all jacuzzis are hot tubs, but not all hot tubs are jacuzzis.
You see this in the flat earth community too, where they'll tell you, oh, there's land out there beyond the ice wall, other lands, and thousands of other lands, and millions of other places just like this out there. No, this is it. God made this place special for us, and we are stuck in here, and you ain't getting out until the firmament opens up and Jesus comes in the clouds of heaven. You can be raptured out, or you'll be stuck here and die on earth during the tribulation. And if you find Jesus and if you believe on him, then you can make it to heaven.
So Jesus isn't here, but there are no other lands. So where is Jesus? I mean, why couldn't the other flat earthers be right and not you? They could have the idea that on those lands is where Jesus exists. And that's why he isn't here anymore. Oh my god, I'm actually defending other flat earthers here. I'm going to slyly move on.
I think I've really said everything. that I want to say.
Well, that is one thing we can thank God for.
But this reminded me of in Jesus' time, when Jesus came on earth. Of course, Jesus is still alive. But this reminds me of the sign in the heaven when Jesus was born, how a star, it could have been something like this, where a star that's normally not even visible to the naked eye, all of a sudden becomes very bright. And so it seems like a new star, but it was always there. It just becomes bright. I just want to tell a story about something that happened. This was back a couple years ago. I was just looking up at the sky a lot, and out of nowhere, a comet, and it was huge. You could see it with the naked eye. That's how I figured it out. I was just out in the backyard one day, and I was like, that looks like a comet, and I could see it with my naked eye. And the news didn't really say anything about it. It was really hush-hush, but this should have been as big of a thing as Halley's Comet. And it was like a green-tinted comet, too, if I'm remembering correctly. And so there's all sorts of stuff happening in the sky, but you can't rely on them to tell you about it. And certainly don't let them think for you and give you theories about this stuff. I personally think that the biblical cosmology makes a lot of sense.
Feel free to create your own opinions. That's perfectly fine. And if you have different ideas, then again, present them. That's fine. No one is stopping you. But claiming space is fake and using biblical cosmology to state it is wrong in itself. We don't even need science there, we just look at biblical cosmology. It talks about God's creative power, how he spoke the universe into existence, which is what the Catholic Church liked about it because it sounds like the Big Bang Theory. I would still disagree with that, but biblical cosmology disagrees with you, and you're saying that it proves your point that space doesn't exist. It is widely accepted that the idea of there being waters in the sky and the firmament protects us from it was talking about the blue sky, like the blue ocean.
And I am a firm believer in the firmament and Earth being flat and unmoving, and that there's foundations of Earth, and that it's more mysterious than even the NASA Spaceball stuff. A lot of people see a lot of appeal to the sci-fi. They want to believe in that stuff because it's like fun to them, the ideas of there being other worlds and all that. To me, it's much more interesting, the biblical truths. And
you see, it's interesting that you have to say biblical truths, because it's not actually the truths. It's only true according to the Bible, but it's not reality. I find it much more interesting to try and figure out and understand reality, no matter what it says in any of the religious textbooks that exist on Earth. We can't start off with any of those as a presupposition because, well, there are too many to start with and they would contradict each other. So we have to kind of start with as unbiased of an opinion as possible by understanding physics, seeing what we see in the universe, and then explaining it to the best of our abilities. And I'll agree, it's not always going to be correct. There is still observational value in looking into books from ancient people. But it's not just books. I mean, there are paintings of a supernova that happened that even lit up the night sky as if it were day. And we know that lasted for a few weeks. Now, these are observational things from the past that we can look at and understand what they are now. We didn't understand what they were back in those days, but they were still recorded. What we have to do instead is realize that some things contain observational value and some things are like Lord of the Rings, where it's not actually true. It's not based on reality. Some of it can be, but not all of it was. Which is why the Bible has to be interpreted and cannot be followed literally because it would contradict itself. Anyway, we've reached the conclusion of his rant and I thought we'd go through it as best we can. Let me know what you thought in the comments, if you thought I made a point. If I didn't, maybe he made a point and I never explained it well enough, or I haven't explained it at all, then feel free to let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the comment section down there. And while you're down there, feel free to subscribe and like the video.